Some games don't just impress you, they make you wonder why you waited so long to play them. Today we're looking at 10 games you'll wish you played sooner. Let's start with Ryse, Son of Rome. This is one of those games people dismissed way too quickly. You play as Marius Titus, a Roman soldier, and within minutes you're already in the middle of a siege. There's no build-up, no slow introduction, it puts you straight into the situation and expects you to keep up. What stands out immediately is how focused it is. It doesn't try to be a massive open-world experience or overload you with systems. It moves from one moment to the next without dragging things out. I went into it expecting something average, something I'd probably drop halfway through, but that didn't happen. I ended up finishing it in one sitting because it never gave me a reason to stop. It keeps its pace steady the entire time. It's also one of those games that benefits from being shorter. It doesn't stretch itself beyond what it can handle. Looking back, it's the kind of experience that stays in your head longer than expected, especially because you didn't go in expecting much from it. Next is The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. This is the kind of game that doesn't pull you in immediately with something flashy. Instead, it builds gradually. You start with a simple objective, something small, and then it keeps expanding. You play as Geralt, moving through a world that already feels active before you even get involved. Every place you visit has its own problems, its own people, and its own structure. I remember starting a small contract thinking it would take maybe 10 minutes, and it turned into something much longer with its own story and outcome. That's what makes it stand out. It doesn't separate major and minor content in an obvious way. Everything feels like part of the same world. You're not just checking tasks off a list, you're stepping into situations that already exist. Over time, you stop focusing on objectives and start following whatever interests you in the moment. Hours pass without you noticing because you're not forcing progress. You're just moving from one situation to another. It's one of those games where you don't plan long sessions, but they happen anyway. Now let's talk about Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. This is a very controlled experience, and that's exactly why it works. It doesn't try to give you complete freedom. Instead, it focuses on pacing and structure. Every section has a purpose. The game knows when to slow things down and when to move forward. What stayed with me are the quieter parts, the conversations while you're moving, the pauses between major moments. Those are the parts that give everything context. When something bigger happens, it doesn't feel random. It feels like a continuation of what you were already doing. The game avoids jumping from one major scene to another without connection. Everything flows naturally. By the time you reach the end, it doesn't feel like it rushed or stretched anything. It just feels complete. That's something a lot of games struggle with. Either they end too quickly or they go on for too long. This one stays balanced the entire time. Next is Mad Max. This is a game that didn't get the attention it should have. At first glance, it seems repetitive. You're doing similar activities over time, and it might not stand out immediately. But after a few hours, something changes. You start seeing how everything connects. You're building your progress step by step. Every improvement matters, even if it's small. I remember starting it without expecting much, just trying it out for a bit, but I kept playing longer than planned, not because the game was constantly surprising me, but because the loop itself worked. You're not overwhelmed with tasks or distractions. The world is quieter, which actually helps. There's space between activities, and that makes each one stand out more. It's not trying to keep your attention with constant action. It just keeps you engaged through consistency. Moving on to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This is one of those games where the scale is clear from the beginning. The world is large, and there's always something happening somewhere. But what makes it work is how it lets you move through it. You're not locked into a path. You can follow the story, or you can ignore it completely for hours. There were times where I didn't progress the main story at all. I was just exploring, finding locations, getting into situations that weren't planned, and those moments ended up being more interesting than what I originally intended to do. The game doesn't push you forward aggressively. It lets you decide how you want to approach it. That flexibility makes it easier to stay engaged over longer sessions. Next is Batman: Arkham Knight. This is one of the most consistent games on this list. Everything works together in a way that feels natural. At the beginning, you're learning how things function, but after some time, you stop thinking about it. You just move and react. That shift is what makes it stand out. You're no longer focused on understanding mechanics, you're focused on what's happening. Gotham plays a big role in that. It's designed in a way that supports everything you do. Movement feels smooth, transitions feel natural, and nothing feels disconnected. The experience stays steady from start to finish without major drops in quality. Next is Mass Effect 2. This game is built around building a team. At first, it feels straightforward. You meet characters, bring them in, and continue. But over time, it becomes more than that. You start paying attention to who they are, what they've been through, and how they react to situations. That connection builds gradually. It's not forced and it's not rushed. By the time you reach the later parts of the game, your focus shifts. It's no longer just about completing the objective, it's about what happens to the people you spent time with. That change happens naturally, and that's why it works. Next is Kingdom Come: Deliverance. This is not a game that tries to make things easy. It expects patience. You don't start strong, and you don't immediately understand how everything works. I remember struggling early on, not knowing how to approach situations or make progress efficiently. But once it starts to make sense, the experience changes. You begin to understand the systems and you see improvement over time. Progress feels slower, but it's more noticeable. You're not being given shortcuts, you're learning through repetition. The game doesn't rush you, and it doesn't simplify itself to make things easier. It expects time, and if you give it that, it becomes more rewarding. Now we're down to the top 2. Elden Ring. This is a game that doesn't guide you in a direct way. It gives you space and expects you to figure things out. At the start, you're moving without a clear direction, but over time you start recognizing patterns, understanding connections, and finding your own path. I had moments where I went somewhere random and ended up finding something important without expecting it. That's what makes it stand out. You're not following instructions, you're discovering things on your own. That approach keeps you paying attention. You're not just moving from one marker to another, you're actually observing what's around you. Finally, Red Dead Redemption 2. This is a game that takes its time with everything. It doesn't rush movement, interactions, or progression. At first, that pace might feel slow, but the more time you spend with it, the more it starts to make sense. I remember just traveling without a clear objective, letting things happen instead of forcing progress. Those moments ended up being just as memorable as anything tied to the main story. The story itself builds gradually, focusing on people and how things change over time. It doesn't rely on constant action. It allows situations to develop, and that approach makes everything feel more grounded. By the time you reach the end, you've spent enough time in that world to understand it fully. And those are 10 games you'll wish you played sooner. Not because they follow trends, but because each one offers something that stays with you after you're done.